My name is Barbara Graner, and I'm the president of the Educational Committee, as well as the head of school at the French Immersion School of Washington. As a bilingual educator for more than 25 years, it has always been very important for me to be sure that my students knew about the possibility for them to continue their studies in France and to continue their bilingual studies. Therefore, it has always been very important for me and for the Education Committee to be able to host a conference, a forum, where we could all learn more about the French education system, the American education system, the differences, as well as learn about bilingual programs. Today we have invited Vincent Nislo to talk on these topics. And Vincent is a professor of American politics at Sciences Po Lyon, and he's currently the attaché for higher education at the French Embassy of the United States. Welcome, Vincent, and thank you so very much for agreeing to do this presentation for us.
My great pleasure. Shall I start?
And I think you can start. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks for coming to your screens tonight. It's a little earlier for all of you than it is for me. This is my post dinner drinks with you, and I'm very, very pleased with the invitation. I wish I could have been with you in person. I love the Pacific Northwest. I've been to Oregon and Washington many times as a visitor to some of your campuses, as a tourist too. And I'm part of those French diplomats who believe that the next French consulate in the United States should be based in either Portland or Seattle, and that's for you to decide. But I have no decision power in that respect. So, first of all, I would like to tell you where I'm speaking from. I'm an academic, so I need to tell you a little bit of who I am and where my experience is. I speak to you, first of all, as the director of Campus France, which is the French agency in charge of promoting higher education in France, of helping American students and international students who are presently in the United States make a decision as to which program they should attend if they have decided to go to France. And also Campus France USA is in charge of processing the pre-consular visa applications of those American students who are going to France for a period of in excess of 90 days, which means that they need a visa. But I'm also speaking as the attaché for higher education, as Barbara indicated, and it's a vantage point that gives me an interesting perspective on the evolutions of student mobility across the Atlantic, our partnerships between French and American institutions, but also on the changes in the curriculum, both in France and in the United States. But also, I speak to you as someone who, at Sciences Po Lyon, which is a school of government and public affairs, was in charge of student mobility for almost 20 years. I started in charge of our American programs, but then I became director of international relations, and then I became the director of Sciences Po Lyon in 2014. So during those years at a school of public affairs in France, I was able to promote exchanges with the United States, partnerships, and this is also the viewpoint that I will be talking to you from this afternoon or this evening. I also believe that the moment we are talking to each other is very, very special. As attaché for higher education, we've seen in the last 2 years a number of partnerships between France and the United States literally die or shrink to the smallest degree possible. We've seen partnerships also completely change, and basically the landscape in terms of partnerships between France and the United States looks like a forest after a devastating storm. There are lots of trees on the ground. We have to pick up and clear the dead wood. But it's also a fantastic opportunity to reinvent those partnerships, to reinvent the curriculum, and to focus on different priorities for prospective students in higher education on either side of the Atlantic. We are also talking to each other this evening at a moment when we see globalization in a very different way from the way we used to see it 5 or 10 years ago. We've had those bumps on the road to globalization because of national security events such as the terrorist attacks, because of economic periods of economic recession, but also obviously during the pandemic. And something that was taken for granted by absolutely everybody 5 years ago is no longer the case so much. And unfortunately, and it's a tragic assertion, but we also see that globalization can also mean war, and that the conflict in Ukraine at the present moment has fantastically important repercussions in our daily lives, also as academics and as instructors. So a lot of what I will be talking to you about in a set of remarks that are prepared not to be super precise, and will give you all the links to the information. I will give you the references at a later stage. But what I would say tonight is probably very different from what I would have said 2 or 5 years ago. I also prepared those remarks this evening in trying to think of who I was speaking to. I prepared them, and I hope I was not mistaken, thinking that I would be addressing a group of high school students and parents trying to make the right decision in which country they should go to pursue a higher education degree, whether it's France or the United States, with possibly the idea that it was not necessarily either or as we say in French, fromage ou dessert, but that either successively or simultaneously, for example, in a double degree, you could benefit from both what the American system has the best to offer and from what the French system has to offer. And so this was also my intent, and I hope I was not mistaken in targeting that kind of audience. I also want to tell you that I will be sometimes probably surprisingly critical of French higher education, and that's because of my experience as an academic in France myself, and that I take very seriously my role as the director of Campus France, but I don't want to lead you into thinking that France has the best higher education system in the world, because it is not true. Neither does the United States, by the way. It has its enormous advantages, but it also has issues which I will address very frankly and in a very transparent manner. So in helping you make your choices, I'd like to start from a few simple statements of fact. Whether you are a parent or a high school student in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, the enormously important thing is the ability to project yourself, at least in the first part of a professional career. And that means what? That means, first of all, that you have to start by eliminating a certain number of choices. It's all about elimination. I certainly don't want to do that. I don't see myself doing that. And it's also to determine which field of study you're approaching. Because your decision to remain in the United States or go to France is going to be completely different. For example, on where you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a doctor. We tend to think, because globalization has become the buzzword of our age, that pretty much all degrees are portable. Well, it is not the case. If you want to practice medicine in France, a degree even from the Harvard Medical School is not worth much. And it's going to be horribly difficult to see your degree recognized. And it's the same thing the other way around. If you are a French student and you want to practice medicine in the United States, the idea of getting a French medical degree is a no-starter. And I don't want to go back to the time when in 1964, my mother had only been the second woman to graduate from medical school in France, in Dijon. And she came to the United States with my dad, and there are two kids. And my father was a professor at Wesleyan University, and my mother applied to work at a local hospital, and they would not even hire her as an assistant nurse because her degree was a French degree. We've made progress since then, notably in terms of specialization, where you acquire a higher degree of competence and skills in your specialization, whether it's orthopedics or cancer or pneumology. And yet, if you want to practice medicine in the United States, get an American degree. If you want to practice medicine in France, get a French degree. The same, to a very large degree, could be said about law. It is a common thing to say that law is the king of disciplines in the United States, but even a law degree from the best legal law schools in the United States will not get you very far ahead in the French labor market, and especially in the French administration. And there are multiple other professions which have degrees that are not very portable. I think, for example, of accounting, a CPA in the United States does a completely different job from un comptable in France. And again, an American degree will not take you very far in France, and vice versa. So basically, it's the case of a lot of highly regulated professions in which again, the degrees are very difficult to translate, or for which it's difficult to find equivalences. And we see this on a daily basis at the embassy, where we have French people, the degree holders, asking us to translate their degrees into equivalences, or vice versa. And not only can we not do it, because there's no such thing as an automatic system of equivalences, but it's a losing battle, because then we hit the wall of a board of certification in the state of Washington, in the state of New York, or in the state of Massachusetts. I think the second point that I'd like to emphasize is that the skills acquired in a liberal arts college program in North America, whether it's in Canada or in the United States, or a similar program in France, and I'm thinking especially of the Sciences Po programs in France, which I know very well, and which I'll be speaking about a little more later on this evening, or similar programs which are multidisciplinary. Those programs are much more important in terms of basing a career than the technical skills that you acquire in extremely specialized institutions or training programs. Right now, what we see in American higher education, and is also coming to France, is the big companies such as Google offering Google certificates. And you wonder, why shouldn't I get a Google certificate, which is basically extremely cheap, rather than a 4-year degree at the University of Chicago, where the tuition is $65,000 a year before housing and board? And you say, well, the answer to your question, not that I recommend necessarily the University of Chicago, is that if you think of 3 fields in which are very specialized and which are very fashionable, if you will, right now, I would speak of computer programming, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. We have in France schools offering excellent programs, training the people in computer programming, artificial intelligence, or cybersecurity. And yet at the same time, I speak as a parent, as a father, and in a way, thank God, my children are older, 34 and 27, so they've gone through the system and found their way. But if they were a little younger today, I certainly would be extremely wary of letting them commit to an extremely technical training at the onset, because the skills that they will acquire might be obsolete in a couple years, or 3 years, or 5 years. Those skills that are not going to be obsolete in 5 years is the ability to process, synthesize, and decision make on the basis of a variety of extremely complex information, and an ability to be sensitive to cultural differences, and an ability to write. We may have entered the era of text messaging, but remember that in deciding to admit your son or your daughter in an undergraduate program or graduate program, whether on this side of the Atlantic or on the other side of the Atlantic, he or she will still face older people of my generation, I am 60, who attach enormous importance to the quality of writing, and who will just discount a vita or a letter of motivation, or simply because it's full of mistakes, and the argument is borderline incoherent. So this is something that you have to take into consideration, even though it might mean a longer curriculum and an investment that's a little superior to what it could have been initially. The third point that I'd like to emphasize, and I want you also to know that I'm speaking from experience. I have spent quite a lot of time here in the United States at different stages of my life. I first came here when I was 4 years old. I was a high school student here. I was a master's student, a PhD student, a visiting professor. I even served my French army in Houston, Texas at the French consulate. So I have some experience of moving from one country to the other, including with children. And I think that the best recommendation that I can make is make the best of the two systems and compare costs, playing on the strengths, but also the weaknesses of the two systems, especially breaking it down into the different stages of an academic curriculum. France has its strengths, but it also has its weaknesses. I think that the first strength that I'd like to speak about is the very high quality of master's programs in France, and the ability to innovate that we have, to create new degrees. And, you know, innovate, create new degrees is not oftentimes associated with the idea we have of France's higher education, which is often described as staid, conservative, and not very innovative. Well, just to give you an example, this year, Campus France has decided to award 30 bourses de couverture sociale. They're scholarships that allow for an American student to study in France and for tuition to be waived and to be covered for his or her medical expenses. And we've decided to award 30 of those scholarships for students who are going to register in 4 different fields, which we've identified as fields in which France's higher education system is the leader. Those 4 fields are European studies on the one hand, social justice and economics, which in French we call l'économie sociale et solidaire. Then the city and sustainable development, or urban studies and sustainable development. And the 4th field of study is agriculture, food, and sustainable development. And we believe that in those 4 areas, the master's programs offered by French schools and universities are leaders, and also offer excellent employment perspectives on either side of the Atlantic, because the skills they teach are transferable to 2 systems that are very different. For example, in the way we organize our cities and we run them, or in the way we approach agriculture and sustainable development. France also has an excellent system of grandes écoles. And you're all aware of those elite schools, which are generally accessible through national competitive exams. And the I would say that the main advantage of those grandes écoles, of those elite schools, even more so than the fact that they're selected, is the fact that most of them, and Sciences Po in particular, are multidisciplinary, which is to say that instead of having to choose a specific field, history, economics, sociology, psychology, math, physics, biology, you have a 5-year curriculum which integrates the bachelor and the master's and allows you to find your way. And again, I will be mentioning Sciences Po oftentimes because it is my closest experience of higher education in France. But the reason why all of the Sciences Po schools, and there are 9 of them in France, including obviously the most famous one in Paris. The reason why those schools are so popular and we only admit 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 9 or 8 students who take the exam to get into the school is because you may arrive at Sciences Po intending to become a journalist, and you end up as the director of a museum, or you end up doing risk analysis for a bank in Central Europe. And so the fact that the degree is multidisciplinary at Sciences Po, all of our students study economics, law, political science, and history, plus 2 foreign languages, makes it easier to actually change, evolve, in the same way that in the United States, the beauty of a bachelor degree, when you only declare your major in the 4th semester of your program, is the fact that you can try various disciplines. You can start reflecting on what you want to do, what you do not want to do. And those programs give you time. And I want to also emphasize the fact that most of the grandes écoles in France, but also most of the master's programs in research universities, now have a built-in obligation for student mobility for at least a semester, if not a full year. Sciences Po Paris initiated the movement more than 15 years ago, and most of all of the other Sciences Po's followed, and all of the business schools followed, and all of the engineering schools followed. All of those schools, or écoles in France, now have an obligation for the students to spend either a full semester or a full year outside of the country, which is much better, if you will, than what happens to a student in a master's program, in a bachelor program in the United States, where the study abroad programs are only an option, but you can certainly get your degree without even setting foot outside of the United States. I also want to draw your attention in France to the fact that a lot of large research universities have started multidisciplinary programs combining, for example, law and English, or law and 2 languages like Spanish and English, or German and English. That a lot of universities have started multidisciplinary programs in social sciences. I know I've worked in partnership with the University of Montpellier, where they have a licence, which is multidisciplinary in law, economics, and international relations and history. Those degrees are extremely versatile and allow you to consider entering in a very diverse master's programs. I think the strength of American higher education resides in liberal arts programs offered primarily by public universities, especially when they offer in-state tuition to their students. I happen to live in Washington, and a lot of my colleagues live in Virginia. I think the best bargain in higher education today in the United States is getting a bachelor from the University of Virginia as an in-state student. And I know for a fact that, for example, in your region, the University of Oregon, and the University of Oregon public system, whether it's Eugene or whether it's Portland State University in Portland, offer high quality education at a cost that has nothing to do with the likes of the University of Chicago, Harvard, or Stanford. And I want to emphasize also that those universities focus very much on undergraduate education, which is not always the case of more famous or prestigious universities for which the focus is graduate programs and doctoral programs. So that's what you have to look at. Multidisciplinary, is there an obligation within the curriculum to study abroad or not? Do you have the ability to combine 2 degrees or not? And that's, again, something that's extremely important, because right now in the United States, you have also extremely innovative programs that make it possible for students to cut down on the length of their degree. And I want to give you just one very specific example, which I'm very familiar with. The University of Virginia, a little bit more than 10 years ago, opened a school of leadership, which in a very short time has become one of the leading schools of public affairs in the United States. And obviously, it began as a graduate program only, but it is now a program that admits rising juniors and seniors into the program and allows them to combine a bachelor and a master in a period of 5 years. Well, that's a gain of 1 year, and you leave the University of Virginia with both a bachelor and a master, but you've completed the 2 degrees in 5 years rather than 6. And this is something that you absolutely want to consider. And the University of Virginia is not the only one in the United States to combine the 2. I also think that you should choose based on where your talents, your special skills, your history, your innovative extracurricular activities will be better recognized. I'm very, very often faced with parents who are, especially French parents, who are presently residing in the United States, who are exasperated, irritated, angry, should I say pissed, with the French system of Parcoursup, because there's no way in Parcoursup that you can put all of the activities that your daughter has done all of the extracurricular activities that your daughter has done, which are extremely valuable if she applies for admission to the University of Washington or to Amherst College or to any kind of higher education institution in the United States. But in France, Parcoursup says there's no box for extracurricular activities. There's no box for your excellence in the violin. There's no box for the fact that you played in the varsity team and that you were the leading scorer of your basketball team. Well, try as you might, Parcoursup is not going to change, because Parcoursup is designed to address large volumes of students, that is to say, practically 95% of French students who graduate with the baccalaureate and then go on to study in French universities. And obviously, unfortunately, we haven't been able to create a special path for students who have studied outside of France in secondary school. So, you know, you don't want to try and put square pegs into circles or vice versa. There's a point where you might want to say, my daughter is much better off getting admission into a leading institution, liberal arts college in the United States. And then when she graduates, apply for a master's program in France. And the two are perfectly complementary. And at the master's level, her special talents, her bilingualism or trilingualism, oftentimes, will be recognized as major assets, which Parcoursup does not have the ability to do. So that leads me to my last recommendation, if you will, which is to think in terms of articulation rather than in terms of double degrees. Yes, indeed, and I will be concluding my remarks this evening by talking about double degrees, but yes, indeed, double degrees are great, but there are few of them. They don't fit everybody's profile, but you have a much better ability to find the shoe that fits if you articulate, for example, an American degree with a French degree. And my a favorite way of approaching this is that you can really have a perfect crossing. That is to say, an undergraduate degree in a French grande école, followed by a master's program in the United States. Even if you have to add 1 year to your curriculum and complete the two in 6 years rather than 5, is just as interesting and productive as a BA in the United States in a liberal arts institution, followed by a master's in a French research university or a grande école. But yes, there are double degrees. And there are specifically double degrees in 3 fields, which I'd like to identify. The first is business. And business studies have achieved a level of global integration, which is uncommon and which you don't see in any other field. A business degree awarded by a French school is recognized worldwide. Why? Not just because HEC or INSEAD or ESSEC are good schools, or l'École de Management de Lyon or l'École de Management de Grenoble, not only because they're good schools, but especially because their curriculum was designed with international standards and international norms and accredited by international organizations, which make it impossible to issue degrees if you don't have that level of internationalization and recognition across the continents and the educational systems. So, business. The same could be said about engineering. And that's and also because in the United States, you have a certain number of institutions, Georgia Tech being the leading one, which have gone as far as opening campuses in France. Georgia Tech every year sends 300 of its students per semester to its campus in Lorraine, in Nancy, and the students come back with a degree from Université de Lorraine and Georgia Tech. And for those of you who are thinking of a degree in engineering, I believe that Georgia Tech is not exactly at the bottom of the pile in terms of the quality of its degrees. And finally, the other field in which you have a very effective double degrees is indeed government and public affairs, and I'm talking about Sciences Po. So the leader in double degrees is Sciences Po Paris. They have 2 double degrees, one with Berkeley and one with Columbia in New York. And this is a double degree in which the students spend the first 2 years at Berkeley, and then the next 2 years at Sciences Po in Paris, and they obtain a master in 4 years, because the Sciences Po degree is not a master's in and of itself, but it's recognized by French higher education and employers as a master. Why is it not the traditional 5-year degree that you find for regular students at Sciences Po, whether it's Paris, Lyon, or I would say Toulouse or Aix or Strasbourg? It's simply because you have the regular degree at Sciences Po Lyon, at Sciences Po Paris, at Sciences Po Strasbourg is 2 years of general education. Then a 1 year abroad doing either an academic program or an internship, followed by 2 years which are recognized as the master's part of your degree. So you get a degree in 5 years. But obviously when you study for 2 years at Berkeley and then or Columbia and then 2 years at Sciences Po in Paris, you've done your mobility abroad outside of the country. So they condense the degree in 4 years. That's an extraordinarily valuable degree, which is extremely interesting and which opens all kinds of doors in government, but also in the private sector or in non-governmental organizations. But obviously the numbers are small. And so I want you to think of, for your children, for those of you who are considering this area, that you can be also, you can tailor-make your own double degree. For example, at Sciences Po Lyon, we allow our students who complete their 5-year degree, who, when they do their 3rd year study abroad program, which is compulsory at the University of Virginia during their 3rd year, then they return to Sciences Po for their 4th year, and then they we allow them to do their 5th year at the University of Virginia, which is the 1st year of their master's program at UVA. They stay on for an additional year in the United States. And after 6 years, they have the degree from Sciences Po Lyon and a master's in public affairs from the University of Virginia. It's not a double degree. It's a joint degree. But you get 2 separate degrees from each one of the 2 institutions, which means that you'll have no problem being employed on either side of the Atlantic. So I just wanted to throw those ideas at you to challenge them, to challenge you with your choices, to give you some recommendations. Some may be stupid or just so obvious that you might think I'm an old doting academic, but I hope it was useful. And again, I welcome your questions and your inquiries.
Thank you, sir, for the time taken to explain the details. By any chance, do you have a summarized presentation of all the details that you mentioned?
I will send it to you. Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you.
I do have a question. I was wondering, for students leaving high school, does it make a difference if they have an AP French exam or if they have an international baccalaureate exam, for example? I was curious.
To get admitted into which system?
That I don't know, because it depends on my students. They do not all have the same desires and aspirations, but all of them have to take the French AP 9th grade, and then they may acquire up to 9 credits when doing what we call the bridge program, which is partially taught by university professors. And once they're done with their university, with their high school classes, some are interested in going to France to study. And so I'm wondering if the AP, for example, has any impact.
No, I think it has. It's not as simple as a plain no, but the AP is going to make a little difference, because if you apply for a French program, it's based on an assumption that your ability to write and speak French fluently. All right. So and this is either you've gone through a program in French throughout your secondary education, including in 12th grade. And in this case, you don't have to take any kind of proficiency exams in the language, or you have not, in which case you might have to take a language test such as the DEF, okay, to enter a French program. But the main difference that even Parcoursup makes is whether you were educated in French during your secondary school years, or whether you were educated in English.
Thank you.
Or another language for that matter.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat that I'm going to read. Does anything change in everything that you have explained if an American student has graduated with an IB diploma?
It's a plus, and again, I don't want to be too critical of Parcoursup, but there are quite a few schools, and especially grandes écoles, that either are not part of Parcoursup at all and have an individual examination of applicants, or they do, they are part of Parcoursup, but they do also look at individual dossiers, and in which case the fact of having an IB is indeed a big plus. Okay, because on top of it, it's a degree which is known to evaluators. I mean, even if you think of Parcoursup, Parcoursup is not a machine. There are men and women operating the machine. That is to say that if you're part of the committee that examines applications to enter the first year of the licence in history at the University of Lyon, you're talking about maîtres de conférences for professors, des professeurs des universités, looking at those applications and checking boxes. And IB is one of those recognized boxes, as opposed to valedictorian of my school, or I received the Rotary Club grant for best student in 2019. Okay, that Parcoursup cannot accommodate. IB, yes.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat. If a French kid graduates high school in the USA, is it possible for him to apply for a French university through Parcoursup?
Absolutely, yes. And actually, that kid or student has to apply through Parcoursup if indeed he applies for a school or a university which is part of that system. Okay, it's not that we discourage the students from applying through Parcoursup, but if you don't apply through Parcoursup, because there are ways of circumventing Parcoursup for very specific types of curricula, you might end up in a pile that's even more disfavorable to the student. So yes, absolutely, and you don't even have to have a French baccalaureate to apply through Parcoursup. I have plenty of examples of high school students who have graduated from high school, from an American high school, without getting the baccalaureate or the IB, who were admitted into French universities. There is the ability of Parcoursup to process those applications, but again, the idea is that there's a lot of the extracurricular activities in your application that would be valued by an American college that are not going to be valued through Parcoursup, and you're going to also have to take a lot of your time translating evaluations, putting into Parcoursup the curriculum for each one of the courses that were taken by this by the student, because I want to make a point which is very simple, but is not always evident to people who are outside of France. France has a national curriculum, which means that when you have graduated from high school and you hold a baccalaureate, we know exactly what you studied in history. We know exactly if you've gone all the way to 12th grade in math or physics. We know exactly the content of your curriculum. It's not the case for someone who has graduated for an American high school and who has Math 502 in her high school degree. The professor who is going to look at that application at the University of Montpellier or at the University of Strasbourg has no clue whatsoever as to the content of Math 502 at the Jefferson High School in Eugene, Oregon. So what you have to do is you have to put the curriculum of 501, of Math 502 at the Jefferson High School, and then a grading scale. My Helen got a 90% grade or got an A+. Again, that A+ or that 95% does not speak to a French evaluator. First of all, we're always very suspicious of very high grades. Grade inflation has not yet hit French university. It has hit secondary education, but not yet universities. So A+, we don't know. So what we want to know is how many students in the class got A+, how many students got A, and how many students got Bs. And if she is in the top 5% of her class, in the top 25%, or in the top half. And that's absolutely essential when you have an American high school degree, which you want to explain to a French evaluator in Parcoursup. He has or she has to look at things that are familiar to him or to her. So what is it that's taught in that class? What level is it taught at? What does it contain? Where was the student in relation to the other students? Was she at the top of the class or at the bottom? That's the relevant information that's absolutely needed. And most of the Parcoursup applications that fail from students who studied outside of France for their secondary education fail not because of the quality of the application, but because it was not explained, detailed, and translated well.
Thank you very much. We have another question. Is there an additional exam needed to enter Sciences Po for French students coming from an American high school with an IB diploma? And how do we prepare for it?
No.
Okay.
Every single student is admitted into the first year with the same exam. So Sciences Po Paris has a specific procedure. It has moved to individual examinations of applications followed by an oral. And the group of 7 Sciences Po, which is composed of Aix-en-Provence, Lille, Lyon, Strasbourg, Toulouse, Rennes, and Saint-Germain-en-Laye, still has a written exam, and it's the same exam for international students as it is for French students. The only time there's a different exam for international students is when we do, and all of the Sciences Po's do in different ways, have an entrance examination to enter directly into the 4th year of the degree. And you have to know that Sciences Po issues a 5-year degree, but that there is a significant percentage of students who enter Sciences Po, whether it's Paris or others, directly at the 4th year level, which is at the master's level. They've done, for example, une licence, a bachelor in international relations or in law or in economics or in political science, at any kind of a large research university, and they take the competitive exam to get into Sciences Po at the 4th year level. And at the 4th year level, for example, Lyon has a different exam for international students and for national students.
Okay, thank you. I also want to say that I would encourage you to look at the chat, because Lucille Delvecchi has been putting a lot of information related to the questions that have been asked. And then we have another question. Because of the difficulty of Parcoursup, it is easier to apply to the Grande École after a bachelor. Is it easier to apply to the Grande École after a bachelor in an American college? Do we still need to use Parcoursup then?
I mean, if you go on the website of Parcoursup, you'll see which schools are part of the system and which schools are not, right? So you can go about it in 2 ways. You choose your school, and then you find out whether it's part of Parcoursup, or you go to Parcoursup, look at the schools that are a part of the system and the schools that are outside of the system, and then you choose. So I can't answer the question because it depends on the school you're applying for.
Thank you. I do not see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask directly a question?
I see a question in the chat that says, where can we find a list of the best engineering schools in France? I will send a list of a couple of or 3 or 4 websites about engineering schools. That's very easy to find, but I'm more than happy to do that. And I will send it along with Lucille in the next 48 hours.
And I see that Hélène Ferret has her hand up.
Oui, bonsoir, Monsieur Michelot. Merci d'être avec nous. So I was just wondering, would you recommend for kids who are bilingual to just go for an IB program in order to enter the best schools? Or they can go to any, I mean, maybe c'est une question redondante, but would you, because some of us expats are not in the same financial situation, so we are not in the same districts or whatever, and so those schools are not available everywhere. So I was just wondering if that's something we have to target in order for our kids to have a great education and to be open to the world, because they are bilingual, trilingual, sometimes full.
I understand your question very well, and
I was just wondering if the IB program was just a pass to the high school, to the very good education after.
I mean, it's a plus, but let's try and not generalize. And again, I want to speak from personal experience. I have 2 children who are radically different from one another, and I don't think there's a recipe for being a good parent in terms of helping your kid orient himself or herself in higher ed. And the best recommendation, I'm sorry to be so trite, is to listen to your kid, and to also take into account his or her abilities that are always very special. And some kids will do absolutely fine without an IB, and invest their time and talents in other ways, and in the end they'll do perfectly well. Some of the kids have the means and the ability, because of proximity, because of the financial needs of their parents, to go through an IB program. That's fantastic, but I would not want anyone to leave tonight with the idea that there's a certain number of obligatory or mandatory steps. I mean, certainly an IB is a plus. It's recognized, it's visible, it's well known. And so if you can afford it, if you have one that's close to, if you have a program that's close to you, that's great. But if you don't, or if it's not the right fit for your kid because he or she works slowly or more slowly in a different manner, and those programs are very demanding on the kid, and if it unsettles him or her or puts her or him under a lot of pressure, then even if it's accessible, even if it's there, and even if you can afford it, that's maybe not the ideal solution. So here I really want to speak more as a parent, as a dad, than as an educator or an academic or the attaché for higher education, the director of Campus France. It's like you find the shoe that fits. You do the best of your that you can, but you take into consideration rather the points that I raised in the first part of my presentation, rather than say, this is a must. You have to do this. You have to do that. I have so many counter examples of that ideal itinerary that everyone has in his or her head for their children. That we could take the whole evening. I could take the whole evening giving you examples of kids that have not followed that absolutely correct path.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, it's easier for me to say it in French, so thank you for your answer. But I was just wondering if IB, because I'm looking for IB positions like high schools, but then it's pretty hard actually to find IB locations. So anyway, thank you.
I do not see any more questions in the chat. So Dr. Michelot, I wanted to thank you very much on behalf of all of us and on behalf of the French Chamber of Commerce of the Greater Pacific Northwest and of the Education Committee. Thank you so much for your very valuable presentation. I think that I can speak for everyone when I say that I learned a lot tonight. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you to all of you who took the time to listen to my ramblings. And I hope that Dr. Michelot will remain Vincent for you, Barbara, and the whole team at in Portland and in Washington. And again, write to us in San Francisco with the whole fantastic team of Lucille, Aminata, and Sabine. Write to me in DC with my own Wonder team, and we'll be happy to answer you. And bonne chance à tous vos enfants. Good luck and have a fantastic end of the year.
Merci beaucoup, Vincent.
Thank
Bonne
you.
soirée.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour, Lucille.